Welcome back to Tell Me More with me, CJ Quartlbaum. Tell Me More exists to help bridge the gap in our intergenerational workplace dynamics and to help us build better leaders. Today, I am joined by a man I am really excited to talk to, and I can't wait for you all to meet. I'm joined by Phillip Holmes. Phil, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, brother? Hey, I'm glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me. Thanks for reaching out.
And I can't wait for this conversation, but I want you guys to know I think Phil might be my like twin from another life. We're the same age. We've got similar backgrounds. We do similar work. Our hair is almost similar. We're about the same level of chocolate. It was fascinating when I came across his work. But Phil, please introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do now?
Yeah, man. So I'm just a millennial country boy from Pickens, Mississippi. Born and raised. Um, my wife and I, and our three boys, we currently live in Jackson, Mississippi. I own a company called Highest Good, and I'm also a content creator, which is how CJ and I got connected. And I create content, and my main goal for a lot of the content that I create is to help individuals detox their career and rebuild their confidence. I found that there are a lot of people that the workplace in general tends to be toxic. There are a lot of people under leadership in middle management and sometimes even on the executive level that are suffering on a day-to-day basis, and you'll never know it due to workplace toxicity. And um, there's various stages that they have to go through. They have to be aware of it, right? And then they're trying to find the language to figure out exactly what this is. CJ and I, we talked about how that very much is similar to our journeys that we went on. And then it's also figuring out what to do from here, how to rebuild my confidence, and what my ultimate mission for my company is in my content online. Kind of sets this up is we want to democratize leadership development. That is our mission. We think that leadership uh, has been gate kept to a few who can afford it or who has someone who is willing to invest in them, and I want to make it more accessible for all because I think that's required in order for workplaces to be healthier and so that work is more fulfilling.
That's good. That is good. Uh, how do you define a toxic workplace?
Oh man, that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever been asked um, to define a toxic workplace, but if I had to give you a definition off the top of my head, I would say this: it is an environment that is dangerous to your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. There's an environment that is created that stops you from performing um, um, or living up and performing to your potential and becoming the best professional employee, leader, uh, designer, whatever you want to fill in the gap with. It prevents you from becoming your best. It actually pushes you in the opposite direction. I think that's a toxic work environment.
Now, I have to ask you this. This is a very honest question, and I won't press charges or anything. I just need to know. I've been following your work for a while now. Have you been following me around for the last 20 years, just taking notes?
It feels that way sometimes for some people. Yeah, like I get those messages a lot. Like, man, bro, like, are you like, do you work where I work? Like, have I just not
Yeah.
seen you around the office? Like, I get that a lot, and that tells you how real it is, right? That tells you how mainstream, honestly, workplace toxicity is, and there are a lot of people who are suffering in silence because you know your ability to recognize health. A lot of that has to do with whether or not you've ever seen health. And so, if you grew up in a dysfunctional or a toxic home where these things were normalized, then um, when you get into the workplace, this is going to be par for the course. You're going to probably maybe know how to survive, right? But you're never going to be able to thrive in that type of environment. I saw somewhere somebody said it perfectly, and I was like, yes, that is it. They said that toxic workplaces tend to feel a lot like high school. And I was like, yep. Because what you'll find is the people who were really good and popular in high school, they tend to be very popular and good at navigating and surviving uh, and maybe even cultivating toxic work environments.
So
But the
that's a
people, go ahead.
I was gonna say this is funny because I've been saying this something like this a lot. You know, we never move beyond high school, and you can know who was a loser in high school based on whether or not they get when they get power. The person who gets power, you know, maybe that middle management, upper management position, and all of a sudden they're the workplace bully. They're throwing their weight around. Like, what were you missing in high school that you're now trying to make up for? I feel like we see that so often. What are some trends you're seeing amongst the people you coach or maybe in your career around some workplace toxicity? What does that look like?
Yeah, my wife and I used to always say, man, it feels like we're always in transition. And I was listening to something the other day that said transitions are just a part of life. It feels like you're constantly in them. I was like, yeah, I've come to accept that now. And so there's these transition stages, right, that people are in, right? There's something that their body is telling them, hey, something's not right here. This is not okay. But they don't quite know exactly what it is or what to call it, right? They just know that this is not okay. And then they try to figure out what to do about it, but again, they're at a loss because maybe they've never been taught how to regulate or manage their emotions, or they haven't been taught conflict management skills. So what happens? They try to navigate it the best way that they know how. So there's two types of personalities I've seen in general. There may be more nuance here, but the two maybe extreme types of responses would be one that crashes out, right, and the other one that shuts down. And that's typically all people know to do. And so this the quiet quitting usually comes from the people who shut down because you can't really it's harder to build a case on people when they don't talk. And so they just kind of coast maybe until they find something else. And then you have the people who crash out. Those are the people who get laid off, who get fired, right? Because it's really easy to build a case. And they do things because they want you to react, they want you to respond. And sometimes they just do them because that's the way they are. And you react that way. And then now they have to shift blame so they don't take any responsibility or ownership for what they did that triggered that. It's just that, oh, this person is crazy. So they gaslight you and make you think that, you have mental health issues and that there's something wrong with you without ever looking at the environment. And so usually when most of the people find my page, they're in that stage. They're trying to find the words, right? But cannot they don't quite know what to call it, and then they see my thing, 5 signs your boss is insecure or something like that, or clear sign you're being forced to quit, and you're like, oh, that's what's happening to me right now, and um, that they started following, and we built from there.
That's good. You know, you talk about making democratizing leadership because leadership has been gatekept. What happens to an organization when it's full of better leaders from top to bottom?
Man, beautiful things. But here's the thing: what we think or what we want to be the outcome is those companies make more money than anybody. Their profits are through the roof. Here's the reality, that's usually not the case, and that's a good thing. Profitability should never be the single factor that determines whether or not a company is successful, but unfortunately, in this rat race that we in our crony capitalistic society is that's all we look at. And so we judge success based on numbers. And there are a lot of incompetent, greedy people, right, who have made a lot of money on the backs and at the expense of middle and lower class workers. But nobody talks about how they made their money, right? They just talk about, well, they must be successful, or you can't tell them anything. How are you going to tell him? Look at all the money that he makes, and that says a lot about what our country and what our workforce values. We value money. more than anything else. And so I think a company, and I want to talk about that because I think that there's an ownership that there's more responsibility, more power that you have, right? And with great power, right, comes great responsibility. You're a New York boy, you're a Spider-Man fan, I know, right? At the same time, though, that doesn't mean that there's not any ownership that employees have to take. Uh, because oftentimes when we're looking for jobs and when we're looking for opportunities, right, money tends to be our priority, right? And I've talked to a lot of people who took a job for money, even though the culture was a little sketchy. You know, they fast paced them through the interview. They saw some yellow flags, which turned out to be red flags, or maybe they just saw the price tag and didn't ask any questions, and they were willing to put themselves through that because of the money. And so there's a reckoning as a society and as a workforce that we also have to do. And so there's this balance between leaders, good leaders, right, in a healthy company that look out for their employees, right? And employees who don't try to get everything that they can get, right? Even whether or not they think they deserve it, right? And so there's this I have to look out for the good of the company. I am and as a leader, I have to look out for the good of my employees. My people are first. But that takes risk on both sides. And that requires vulnerability on both sides. And so this is why the most of the responsibility falls on the leader because ultimately it's upon them to create that culture and to take that risk first, right? And to hire and retain and keep the employees who take that next step, right? I'll take 2 steps, you take 1 step, right? And we realize, hey, we can trust each other and we're gonna look out for each other. And I have a small company, but that's the environment that we've created here, is that my employees know that I'm always gonna have their back, that I'm gonna pay them as much as I possibly can, that I'm not gonna make 100 times more than what I'm paying them. And but that in corporations and elsewhere, that's oftentimes not the case.
Yeah. It sounds like you're advocating ultimately for leaders to lead. You know, the leadership, I think you're right. Leadership establishes the culture and culture trickles down. If you as a leader are not modeling what you want your people to be, then you can never expect them to emulate that. If you're telling everyone, hey, I need you to be on time for the meeting, but you're consistently 15 minutes late, you're setting a tone
Problematic.
there.
Yep.
I had breakfast with a guy this morning and I was telling him, you know, he's retired cop and his wife is this big time doctor. And I was telling them that in my life that these are two people I look at who exemplify leadership. And I think what it comes down to is the fact that they care about people. Like there are leaders who they'll get you to do the job and do whatever it is that you're assigned to do and you'll do it maybe begrudgingly and maybe that's the leader that everyone trauma bonds over and you'll get the result. But then there's the leader who you know cares about you and is for you. Those are the leaders that people will run through a wall for. And I think when we develop those kinds of leaders, profit is it's important, right? Because capitalism, but we start to see the bigger impact on society.
As a leader, you're 100% right, caring about people. So if I had to sum it up, because this is oftentimes where I see kind of like this great divide. And if you're listening, listen to this closely. You cannot be a good, great, or even decent leader if self-preservation is your priority. And I'm going to go a step further. You cannot be a good employee and a good teammate if self-preservation is your number one priority. I've seen so many people throw others under the bus to protect their job, right? Because as a collective, employees can hold companies accountable. If self-preservation is your priority, then what happens? Well, hey man, I gotta look out for me and my family first. And this is one of the things that as a society, particularly within subdominant cultures, and I would say especially within um, Black culture, I think that to some extent we've lost that value, right? We've we've conformed in some ways, um, and I've been guilty of it. I'll be the first one to say that I've been guilty of that on some level. And as I've gotten older, I recognize that that's a I mean, I know this is a I'll say this, I'll say it this way, that's a tenet of American society, right? Rugged individualism. But that's not how we made it as far as we made it, just thinking about ourselves.
I mean, this idea of self-preservation, when I think about the highest good, I think about this definition of justice that I love. It's the disadvantaging of yourself to seek the flourishing of another. And when I think about us being good, if not great leaders, if we're guided by self-preservation, at the very least, you take that home. What are you now teaching your kids? And then how do they show up and operate in society? See, this rugged individualism makes us think that it's all disconnected. My work is my work, and my kids go to school over here, and all those things, but it's all interconnected. It's all
100%.
intertwined.
100%.
And who I am, like I've got 3 little ones, and I think a lot about how am I showing up in the spaces that I show up in, and what does that teach them about who we are in this world?
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced that you don't have a Truman-like show camera just following me around,
Nah,
but this is this is good.
you know how it
Tell me
is, man.
about tell me about your coaching practice. Who do you work with? Why do you work with these people? And then ultimately, what's like your greatest hope when taking on a new client?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's interesting. When I started out, so I'm going to throw in a little business advice because I do think that um, more people should consider creating the cultures and the businesses, right, that they want to see. Joining is great, right? But when I first started this, I didn't really know who I was going to be talking to. I knew I wanted to talk about, I started out very broad, like leadership. Let's just start there. And I started making content here and there on leadership. Um, and then I created something on toxicity, and that seemed to resonate. And I was like, well, wait, like that's part of my story, right? I actually been through that. I've lived that. That's why I'm working for myself now. And what basically began to evolve is I still care about leadership development because I just don't want to talk about the bad. And then I was like, man, I can use this to help create leaders, right? Because a lot of people come to work with me not because they say, hey, I want to become a better leader. I have a few, right, who want to come for leadership development, but nobody comes to the workplace toxicity guy looking for coaching, right? Very few people do, and the ones that do are some of the best people because they're saying, "Hey, I don't want to be that," right? Um, and and so basically, the people that I coach are usually mid to late career professionals, so millennials, Gen Xers, um, um, probably I would say 60% women actually, who are dealing with bullying, micromanaging, or in general just a hostile work environment. And sometimes they just left and they're trying to figure out how to heal. Um, Other times they're trying to figure out how to get out, right? Hey, I need help trying to figure out how to navigate this. Sometimes these are individuals who are actually just in dysfunctional work environments that are not quite toxic. They're working with people who generally want to do the right thing, but there's a lot of miscommunication, right? And so you're reacting and then they're reacting, and then you're reacting and they're reacting, and the situation is not nearly as urgent, right? And so there's a broad range, but I work with a lot of healthcare professionals, relatively, because the healthcare system and I want to work with more healthcare professionals because if we need any where to be healthy, we need it to be the hospitals, right?
The people
Um,
taking care of us.
right. Yeah, we need them to take care of each other before they can take care of us well. So, um, what it looks like is I have a few options for people. They can do one-on-one coaching with me, and when they come, I want them to be focused on the internal work that has to be done. Because I don't say it like this, but basically my thing is, hey, we already know that all that stuff out there is bad, right? And I am with you. Um, and I listen, of course, and letting them know in real time, hey, I care about your unique situation and the unique things that you've experienced. But then we redirect and we say, hey, but the purpose of coaching is to focus on you. So here's the thing: anytime you try to control people or outcomes, that's manipulation. Like, so I can't guarantee you anything when it comes to changing people or changing outcomes. All right. I can, however, walk you through the process of doing some deep internal work that manifests itself in some powerful skills that set you up for success, that sets you up to put yourself in the best possible situation. It's almost, and I always tell my, I played ball through college. It's like an athlete. I don't train in the off season and train during the regular season to get to a game for guarantees, right? I train and I work hard in the off season to put myself in the best possible position to win. But nobody, no coach, right? No personal trainer can guarantee me an outcome when I'm competing or when I'm dealing with other people, right? And so, those that can accept that, they thrive. And usually, what they're working on is I got to get my confidence back, right? Um, I need to know that I'm capable. I need help developing courage, right, to have these conversations. I need tactical skills to know how to navigate difficult conversations. I need to figure out how to um, offer feedback and correction without undermining my boss or without sounding or coming off as condescending, right? Because usually the people that I'm dealing with, these are well-meaning people who want to do the right thing, but they lack what I also lack, right? Is tact. They don't know how to. They struggle talking to people, and so oftentimes their words come off harsher, right, than they're intended. Um, and or they're easily dysregulated, right? And so when people aren't acting how they feel like people should act, right? When people aren't just doing what's right, they get frustrated and disillusioned and they just kind of react. And that can exasperate already difficult situations. And so what
Been
I want
there.
them to do, and it's usually around the third session where they kind of turn a curve and I can start seeing that light come back in their eyes, and they start to kind of get their confidence back. And I've had so many success stories that just have floored me because the work that I do is the work really that anybody with some discipline and a little bit of training can do, and it's listening to people, asking hard questions, but guiding them not by telling them what to do, which is contrary to how I was raised, and I think probably even my nature, but by simply asking questions and listening.
Yeah. So much of my work, because I'm on the other end where I'm dealing a lot with elder millennials and millennials as well, but I'm also taking a keen eye on Gen Z. And so much of what I say to them is, I'm not trying to trying to tell you what to think. I'm trying to teach you how to think.
There we go.
And it's when we learn that piece, because I've been there where I'm like, your words and your deeds are not matching. And I'm backed into a corner and now I'm reacting. And everything I'm saying is true, but the way it's coming off, you're not going to hear any of it.
Yep.
And in fact, you're going to use that to turn it around on me. So when I'm coaching people, I'm saying to them, when this situation comes, because this doesn't come out of nowhere. You know, you've dealt with this boss, this manager before, and you know their patterns of behavior. So be ready for it. And when it's game time, to use the sports analogy, you have the tools. Now use them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not very empowering to sit there and lecture to a person. You're not teaching them how to operate with autonomy. You're teaching them how to be dependent. So I don't want a client who sends me urgent emails saying, "Hey, I got this meeting with my boss in 20 minutes. Like, I need you to tell me what to say." It's like, no, no, no. Like, I want you to understand the framework. I want you to understand the system. If you continue with coaching, it's because you appreciate the sounding board, not because you're looking for the next silver bullet that's going to get you out of a sticky situation. Right? You can, you know, go to YouTube and find plenty of people who will just talk at you. Coaching is something deeper than that. And I don't think, but I think a lot of people have a hard time believing, if they've never experienced it, the transformative power of having someone who will act as a sounding board, an objective sounding board, right? Not somebody who just agrees with everything that you says or just validates um, um, every single thing that you say, but someone who actually listens and asks you hard questions to make you reconcile the inconsistencies and the contradictions that live within you.
Mm. That's hard work. Hard work. Now, on the flip side of that, do you ever have toxic leaders come to you and say, I need help?
If I have, they've never made it past the consultation. It's hard to say just within a consultation if a leader is toxic. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I've had some people that say, "Hey, you know," I had this one guy that told me his employee sent him um, one of my videos, and I was like, I mean, well, that speaks to the fact that she felt safe enough to send you that, and that you showed up to, figure out, what this was about. Like, I mean, that takes a lot. Now, he didn't sign up for coaching, and I wish him well. And I'm not saying that he was toxic just because of that, but you never really know. Most of the people that I work with um, are people who they probably have some dysfunctional tendencies, but usually that's dysfunction primarily manifests itself, at least from their perspective, when they're sharing it with their colleagues and with their senior leaders, the people above them. What I always try to challenge them on is you're an individual who wants to do the right thing and who probably treats your employees better than most bosses or managers treat their employees. That does not necessarily mean that you're a good leader, because it's almost like, well, she's better than most, and but it doesn't necessarily mean that your employees always feel psychologically safe, right? Because usually, if you have a way of talking to your managers that is exacerbating issues, that communication problem most likely is happening, but with your employees. Here's the thing, though: your employees don't have any power over you, right? You have on your forehead, I saw somebody say, like, "I can fire you," right? So they're not ever gonna tell you that you're a bad boss, or there's things that there's areas where you can improve, unless you explicitly ask them and consistently over time create a place that is psychologically safe, where they know that their feedback and their opinions are welcome.
So you hit on what might be the core tenet of all the work that I do, and it
Mhm.
is psychological safety.
Yeah.
Um, Without it, we have nothing. Without it,
It's
we are
foundation.
anxious. Yeah, and yet you find what I've found is that so many managers, leaders, bosses think that this is something. This is just some new age woo woo stuff. We don't need any of that psychological safety. What do you think? How do you feel psychological safety transforms an environment?
So it creates an environment where people can be vulnerable. Now, there are levels of a vulnerability that are appropriate depending on the relationship, right? And sometimes I even talk about intimacy and connection as well, right? I'm intimate and or even just vulnerable with my wife in ways that I might not necessarily be vulnerable with a friend, right? And then that same thing extends to employees. What does vulnerability look like as an employer? I mean, I'm sorry, as an employee. Um, or what does a psychologically safe environment that invites vulnerability look like? Well, a place where I can say, "Hey, I messed up. I made a mistake. I didn't send that email. I missed that deadline." Where I don't have to posture. I don't have to cover it up. I don't have to make excuses. I can own it and know that it's going to be used to help me grow, not as not and it's not going to be weaponized against me. I'm not going to be shamed for it. That my boss is going to come to me and say, "Hey, thank you. I really appreciate you letting me know. Let's figure out how we can resolve that." And then they may even go a step further and say, "Hey, hey, so help me understand, how did this happen? You know, I know you're a hard worker. do you have too much going on right now? Because sometimes here's what people don't understand. It's not just, oh, I forgive you and move on. I like to get ultimate clarity because things don't just happen. Usually there's a reason. And so I like to get ultimate clarity on not why it happened, but what happened, right? What happened is so important because it could be a systemic issue. It could be a performance issue, right? If it's a systemic issue, that's what I mean because this person's work, right, is overloaded, and for whatever reason, they didn't have the confidence or the courage, right, to come to me and talk to me about it. So then I got to ask them about that. Now, if I've done everything that I can to create a psychologically safe environment, and that I've always thanked them, and that their workload, right, is reasonable, um, then we're talking about a performance issue. Well, and we got to ask some questions. All right, um, how are you naturally gifted? And I have an assessment that I use. It's called the Working Genius Assessment. It's one of the best things because I think this is the best way to really get to the root of performance issues. Do we have you working out of your genius areas? Right. So with me, tenacity is not one of my geniuses. I'm a wonder invention guy. So I'm very high level thinking, visionary, all that. So if you give me a day, or if you assign me a bunch of tasks that require tenacity, hard deadlines, right, where I don't there's not a whole lot of thinking. There's really just executing. You're setting me up for failure. And matter of fact, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to tell you no, right? I'm delegating that to somebody on my team who loves that type of stuff, right? I would have clients. This was when I was doing more marketing agency work. Um, they would try to call me for um, things that they need, and I'm like, I told you, I know the owner. I know you're probably used in the past of talking to me, Sarah. That's your person that you talk to. She's going to take care of you, and it's not because I don't have time for you. It's no, I know I'm gonna forget, right? I know that you may not get your stuff for a week. I hired Sarah because Sarah's gonna get you your stuff in the next 6 to 12 hours, right? Or sooner if necessary. And so, that is about learning about your natural abilities, is about setting yourself up for success, right? And learning about your employees' natural abilities and how they're wired. That's how you set them up for success. And usually you can find the issue in one of those areas. Rarely when you're dealing if you hire people with good character, you're not dealing with people who are just being lazy. Most of the time, it's been a system issue. I have to just continually work hard to get my people to be vulnerable and to because I'm like, hey, I need your eyes too. When you see something broken in the system, right? This works two ways. I need you to let me know, and because I'm not going to blame you, I want to fix it.
Yeah, see that level of vulnerability in leadership is so necessary because it lets people know I'm not sitting up here and you're down there. I need you to come to me and let me know what are my blind spots because we all have them. And all that does is it creates a better working environment for all of us. When I
Absolutely,
think about when I think about leadership and I think about good leadership, it is setting people up for success.
100%.
I've seen places where they do all of the assessments, working genius, disc, strength finders, you name it. What are your gifts, talents, all of those things. But then they don't listen to them and they don't put people in the best position to succeed and then wonder why. Why is this person failing? Why is this person so unhappy? Because there's a mismatch. And if our goal here is more than just to make money, but it's to develop good people, then how do we put them in those positions to succeed? The piece that I wrote this week is about, I think, ultimately, like the fruit of your leadership is how you develop others. So, Greg Popovich, he's the example I use. Great, one of the greatest basketball coaches ever. But he's not great because of I think it's like 15-year, 50 plus win streak, 5 championship rings. It's his coaching tree. It is the amount of head coaches and assistant coaches in the league right now who pass through his system. And when you listen to people talk about Greg, Coach Pop, the veneration they have for this man, the adoration they have for him, and the way they talk about their time there. Yeah, we worked hard. He pushed us to our limits, but he got the best out of each and every one of us. To me, that's classic good leadership right there.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many things that you said because the pop thing. there's one player who I'm not gonna name him, but I was listening to him on a podcast, and he didn't last very long in San Antonio. And I'm hearing his side of the story, but what he described is he was adamant that he was better than Tony. He was better than Ginobili, right? And he would, go into practice and he would kill him. He was like, but he's like, Coach, those are Coach's favorites, right? Is how he phrased it. And there was something about the way that he framed the conversation that that made me believe him, but also recognize that he was missing the point. Believe him in the sense that he was better, right? But we all know that there are those so-called top performers that that bring everybody else down. That are toxic to the organization. That are toxic to the culture and the system that you're trying to build, right? Because they're so focused on individual accolades and not the collective that they bring the whole system down. And I gather from listening to this individual over the years that that may be a factor that unfortunately he hasn't quite been able to see just yet, right? And I hope he does look at that at some point in retrospect, because you want these guys to get older and start sounding like old wise men that they have the potential to be. And sometimes that's a little bit harder when you have a lot of money because you ain't got a lot of people around you that's going to tell you the truth. You can keep people away who are willing to be honest with you, but so much of what you said is right on point. I think taking those assessments, right, and not really doing anything with them. I think that goes back to rugged individualism because they think that the assessment is for the person who's taking it. What I tell my team is that and I've done this for workshops. I was like, I've done workshops for some organizations and some teams, and I'll go back after I've given them the working genius assessment. And I'll be like, all right, guys, I'm still learning names. I was like, but I know all of your geniuses. I was like, because when I look at you, I see your geniuses on your forehead. And I couldn't remember names, but I can go around and tell everybody what their genius was. And it's the same way that I operate with my team because that tells me how they're wired, right? That tells me how they work. And that's going to have implications on how they collaborate and partner, right, with the other people on their teams and within the organization. And but rugged individualism says, hey, take this assessment. You need to know a little bit more about yourself. And it's like, yeah, but as a boss, as a leader, like I need to know that just as well as you, just as good as you know it. That's essential for me in order to put the right pieces in place for us to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. And all you're doing in that moment is you're asking leaders to lead.
That's it.
Don't just give me the assessment. Now it's your job, your responsibility to do something with it.
Yeah, some of these
So
guys are,
I
are I think running straight ahead, but not looking behind and checking on their team. They're running at a fast pace, saying, "Look at me," with the pack struggling to keep up, and they're just saying, "If I can do it, why can't y'all?" And that's a clear sign that you're not ready for leadership because leadership requires a level of empathy and other awareness that is always considering the other person before themselves. That's hard to find, but it can't be developed.
there's this whole trend in leadership right now where people are talking about empathy is for the weak and empathy has no place in leadership. And I'm like, again, it's just such a failure of us as a society. When you walk around and you are proudly declaring that you're a low empathy person, all that shows me is you are emotionally immature and there's a lot of work you need to do. And I guarantee your team is hurting because of it.
100%. But it makes sense when you realize that if success equals the amount of money in your bank account, and these individuals got that much money in their bank account by being low empathy people, and that's why they feel so confident, right, to be able to say empathy is a weakness, right?
Mm,
It makes
yeah.
sense. So our value system is jacked up, and we got to start there if we want to fix this American problem because it's getting worse. Like that dude is like, ish is getting weird. Part infinity is like, it is.
Yeah, man, I don't know how we do it, but we have to learn to divest success from dollars. or dollars as the main metric or only
Yeah.
metric?
It's a metric, but it can't come before
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. Oh, there's so much I could say, but I will not.
We
uh,
gotta have a conversation another time, man.
yeah, Phil, I appreciate you joining me on this episode to tell me more. Whenever I talk leadership, I love to close with this question: what to you are the three most important qualities of a leader?
So when I think of our values at our company, we adopted the behavioral values of another organization called the Table Group. I read a book called The Ideal Team Player, and I think that these things are required of a leader. And a leader has to be humble, hungry, and smart. Um, they have to consider others more important than themselves. They can't think too highly of themselves, but not also think humility is not thinking too low of yourselves as well. They have to have an accurate view of themselves. I think that's humility. Um, I think that you have to be keenly aware of people um, and their complexity and their unique values and the unique and their unique priorities, and their unique gifts and motivations. And you have to avoid projecting what you believe and your worldview and how you see the world and what you prioritize onto other people, because that's oftentimes what causes so much confusion and chaos and frustration and con- tension with one another. And then finally, a leader has to be driven to do something great, but greatness, that drive has to be with the goal of serving others. So we talked a lot about employees, right? But I also think the business that you build, it should not be primarily motivated by money. It should be primarily motivated by service, by solving a problem, right? That is going to make people's lives better or that is going to make society better. But oftentimes when we think about products, we think about what's going to make me the most money. And if you're building a business based off of what you think is going to make you the most money, please stop. And instead, start exercising and practicing self empathy to really figure out what it is that you love and that you care about and get to know yourself. And then practicing empathy towards other to figure out what the need is out there and figure out where your passion and that need intersect, and that's where you get your purpose. And so drive means I'm going hard after helping and serving as many people as I possibly can with the best possible solution that I can come up with.
That's so good. Humble, hungry, driven. I think about this. Where I live is it's a pretty affluent community. Not that I'm super affluent, but where I live is, and I talk to a lot of people here, and I find that the people who have made their money in industries that are solely geared towards making money, that they reach this place in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and they look at me and they go, CJ, is there more to this? I had a conversation with a woman last night in her 50s. She's an accountant. And she goes, I've made all the money. I'm good. Like retirement is right around the corner, but I feel empty. But then when I look at the people here who have made a lot of money, but that money came through what may have been like a service sector. So I know one guy who has a pretty big restaurant, chain of restaurants. And his whole thing was, I just want to put out the best food possible. My joy comes in seeing people and seeing the smile on their faces when they take that bite. And you see there's a difference here between I just made money to make money versus I wanted to love and serve people and the money came with.
You know, if your clients, if the end result of your product, um, which is a client's joy, happiness, satisfaction, transformation, if that doesn't just give you joy and fulfillment when you see it, if you only look at your clients or your target audience and see dollar signs, you're never going to know and experience fulfillment until you change your mindset. So I think that because food service, right? There's nothing. It's not like he's feeding the hungry, but he's it is still a service to people. Um, it's not some type of social impact thing. And so we're not saying you got to join a nonprofit or you got to build a nonprofit. You just like have a product that solves a problem or that brings other people joy. That alone, and that can be a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Good
world
word,
is
bro.
available
I
to
love that
you.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that example. That's a good word.
So tell the people where they can find you.
You can visit us at highestgood.consulting. You can also find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, and TikTok every once in a while when I feel like posting a video over there. But you can find me almost every day, twice a day on Instagram and Threads, and
There it
once a day
is.
on LinkedIn. Yeah.
There it is. Phil, thank you for joining me. And thank you for listening to another episode of Tell Me More. I'm curious, what are your experiences with toxic leaders? Drop something in the comment and don't just tell us the bad side. Tell us how you overcame it or how you worked through it, or maybe drop some questions you might have about the subject. And I'll see you next time as I ask you to tell me more. Phil, man, I appreciate you.